idea that came out of the military some years ago. In fact, I don't even know that it came out of the military. It may have come from somewhere else. But it's an idea that I wanted to discuss today on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host, by the way. I'm Kurt. Today is Wednesday, the 28th of July of 2021. Thank you for everybody who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube. Welcome aboard today. Remember that Rumble is my preferred platform because I'm relatively certain there's no censorship there, and I have a challenge basically, and it's really just trying to get people to do this for me. If you find there's any censorship going on there, I want to know about it because I probably will end up switching platforms if I find out that that's the case. Today's subject is on a thing called EEFIs, which is an acronym for Essential Elements of Friendly Information. The S is actually should be on elements, but it doesn't end up getting put there, obviously, because it wouldn't be as catchy an acronym, right? The military and its catchy acronyms. But I wanted to go ahead and read my notes, which are kind of long today, to give you an idea why this comes up, why this is something I think needs to be talked about. Many years ago, I fell into a position in the U.S. Air Force that required me to deal with data, various kinds of information, requiring protection commensurate with various levels of high security and confidentiality designators. I'm quite sure there are others who could talk about even more closely guarded information. Be that as it may, there were lessons taught to those of us who were tasked that probably should be generally instilled not just in those possessing security clearances, but into everyday people. We were taught to not talk about what we did for our respective services. We were informed that doing things like using different routes to get to and from work would keep us more secure. Protocols were in place with various training and disciplinary penalties to make it so people had a bare minimum of security-related methodologies instilled in their daily practices. There was one thing, though, that was mentioned in passing and is now proving to be a very significant one, a very significant thing. When you tell someone where you live or how many children you have or where you work, they're able to establish patterns that can be used to track and trace you. This has become obvious when I listen to folks talking about people's habits being tracked by using information from their cell phone or similar. The military had a name for what seemed like harmless information that could lead to the exposure of things you didn't want known. They were talking about things like top secret information. I'm employing the term for things like your personal habits and activities as well. In fact, the number of things that can possibly be traced, tracked, etc. using that information. They were called EEFIs, or Essential Elements of Friendly Information. The Air Force trainer that initially clued me in on EEFIs talked about the fact that there used to be no security around U.S. air bases in Korea, and sortie training and mission flights was being posted on public bulletin boards on those bases. Because it was virtually impossible to tell friendlies in the civilian population from enemies, people working for what is now North Korea would walk onto military bases with relative impunity and steal that sortie information, that information. It was from there that I began to understand just how vulnerable pretty much everyone actually was. I wanted to discuss that just a little on today's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics as a result. I hope that you don't find this too boring, but I really, really kind of want to get some things across to some people who are probably not aware just how vulnerable they are. And I wanted to explain some things, I guess you could say, about myself while I'm at it. People look at me and think, gosh, he's a snooty individual. You know, I think that that's probably true. What they don't realize is that it's not about me being snooty. It's about me being private and doing so on purpose, because you never know who's actually trying to gain information that they can use to cause you problems in the future. You just never know. And I'm not paranoid about that. And to be honest with you, I let far more information than my desire to let out there into the public eye. I was in a parking lot just the other day with my son, and I've trained him. He's moderately autistic, so level 2 autistic, and I've told a lot of people about him. He's gotten to the point where he's actually a lot like any other kid. The fact that he's autistic, it's not really that big a deal a lot of the time. But just like with my other kids, I trained them in certain ways that I've also taken the time to train my son. So when we get into parking lots, I have him constantly on the watch for potentially moving cars. Because the problem is people really don't pay attention when they're around other people. So just as a protective measure, I've trained him to heed me, to listen to me more unquestioningly than I expect him to do so for others. Because I consider myself responsible to train him. Now, somebody was watching something that happened recently when I was dealing with him in the parking lot. And I called my son to me with the idea that I saw that there were things going on that were going to potentially be perilous. This individual watched and said, "I really admire the discipline that you've got over the child." And that was the worst thing, almost not the worst thing, there are worse, but one of the worst things that he could have done. Because I don't want people knowing that sort of thing. I don't want people knowing where I live. I don't want people knowing what car I drive. I don't want people really directly associating me with my child. Now, that sounds odd, right? But the thing is, that means if they try to do something with him, I can be around and have them not know that he's my child, and I can step in and take remedial action as a result, right? Without horrible concerns over whether or not they're going to know. Therefore, I have them at a sort of a disadvantage. Now, of course, most of the time, none of that's going to happen. Thank God. Thank God that people don't generally go around trying to snatch kids and so forth. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen, though. But the point, and all of this leads back to this idea of essential elements of friendly information. All of this leads back to this idea that you probably shouldn't be noising about, whether it's on social media or in parking lots or in stores or whatever, you probably shouldn't be noising things about with regard to yourself or others or your job or various other things, because in doing so, you make it possible for people to collect information on you that they can then use to come to other conclusions. So one of the things when I stepped into a more security-oriented facility in the military that they told me was, when people ask you how many planes do you estimate there are on your base, that's not their business. They told you what to do about that. I'm not going to get into detail on that. They did the same thing for people and when exercises occurred and things of that sort. You weren't supposed to say any of that. Now, some of it was obvious, and that is more reason not to just release that information into the wild without consideration or concern. Pardon me, I'm looking at my time just to make sure that I'm not going over. So the point is, essential elements of friendly information are those pieces of information which, if released to various individuals, can make it easier for them to find out things that you may not want for them to know. And they may seem harmless. It may seem like harmless stuff. People have said that another thing that can happen with that is people can use that information to do things like guess passwords. And they're right. That's true. That's why I use very random passwords, by the way. I don't use anything that I generate except out of applications that do that for me. And I'm not even going to tell you which applications. That ought to give you an idea how concerned about this sort of thing I am. But literally there have been instances recently where a person's phone could be tracked one place, could be tracked another, so that people knew where that individual was at a given time. So when certain things happened, they knew that they were at least around when those things occurred. And these are the things I'm asking you to take yourself, make matters of concern to you. Stop giving people information they don't need. I know it seems like just a nice, friendly thing to do. I'm warning you that there are people who will use that information to do things like decide when it's a good idea to break into houses in a given neighborhood. Okay? Steal your children. Not that there, again, are a lot of people interested in doing that. But you need to be watching out for that. All right, I need to go ahead and wrap up now. I'm a little bit over time already. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I am Kurt. Today is Wednesday, the 28th of July of 2021. That means tomorrow will be Thursday, the 29th of July of 2021. This is that hump day. That means tomorrow being Thursday will be just one day closer to the weekend. Obviously, there will be another day for that to happen. Thank you for everyone who's been here on Rumble, on the podcast, and on YouTube. Remember that Rumble is my preferred platform. Remember that you can give me a positive or negative Rumble on Rumble. Remember also that you can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. That's a like or a dislike on YouTube. And remember that you can comment on either platform, and that I really find your comments to be helpful to let me know whether or not you find what I'm saying to be useful or interesting to you. Remember, the subject for today has been EEFIs, and tomorrow we're going to talk about the subject of what pretty isn't. And that's a kind of an interesting subject, because I want to talk about something that we tend to do where attractiveness is concerned that is a failure on many people's part. And I'll acknowledge it's a failure on mine if I'm not really careful. So I'm not saying I'm not one of those people. Hope you're doing well today. Hope things are going well for you. Hope that your week goes well. It's a little bit of a downer of a week for me. I'm not going to get into details at this moment. But it's a little bit of a tough week for me, and I'm hoping that things pick up, get better, but I kind of on certain regards, I think that that's not likely to happen. Hope you're doing well today, as I say, and hopefully we will see you on Thursday's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on Wednesday, the 28th of July of 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.